Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Transforming Business with me, Marvin Schneider, where I talk about the transformation of the global business and investment communities to create wealth, sustainable wealth on an ongoing basis in ways that enhance the well-being of the individual, the wider community, and the environment. And that agenda is fundamentally prefaced in a notion or a paradigm that being in business is an opportunity to be of service to society. It's not an opportunity to make a lot of money as possible in as many ways as possible and exploit society in the process. And in a lot of ways, I mean, that this oughtn't be a controversial proposition. The idea that the governing objective of a large corporate and the investment community is to create wealth in ways that enhance societal well-being. It oughtn't be a controversial proposition, but we are shifting away from 5.5 to 6 decades of a business paradigm commonly referred to as the shareholder primacy paradigm, where the fundamental corporate governance mindset under that paradigm was popularized by Milton Friedman and the Chicago School of Economics type of thinking, where corporates, in their view, had one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to maximize profit for the benefit of owners, shareholders, and corporates, and those that are responsible for the leadership of corporates should have no concern, no social concern, or no concern outside that fundamental objective. Now, in previous episodes of this podcast series, I've talked about the toxic nature of that proposition, and particularly as it plays out in basic primal human motivations of self-interest, greed, fear, power over empowerment, those kinds of things. And so there is a fundamental shift occurring in society where the broader, wider community is no longer willing to put up with the kind of behaviors and outcomes that corporates generate. And so in one way or another, this paradigm shift is occurring. I don't have a crystal ball to say when that will occur. I'm fairly certain it's going to be occurring in my lifetime. And so my primary purpose for the rest of my time here is to facilitate the transformation of the global business and investment community to create wealth on an ongoing basis and do it in ways that enhance societal well-being. So in this episode, I'm going to be talking about the consumer side of things, and particularly consumption in higher consciousness as a primary driver that's going to pretty much force business leaders and the investment community into heel. But before I do, let me just quickly share with you the journey that we've taken so far, because I've been doing this podcast series for a number of months now, a month and a half, thereabouts. So let me just quickly share your screen. I'll show you where we're at in terms of the evolution of the podcast series. So I have set up a brand new YouTube channel. It's only got a small number of subscribers at the moment, but it is growing. And I've got about a dozen or so videos. So other than starting up with a couple of introductory videos, one of the very early videos was all about the notion of business operating in higher consciousness. And that's going to be fundamentally important, because the legacy business leaders that are still heavily dominated in the thinking of Milton Friedman and the Chicago School of Economics will find it very difficult to even contemplate the idea that business has a higher purpose other than profit maximization in any way possible, regardless of the outcomes to, the individual, the wider community, and the environment, or, broader societal outcomes from the actions of corporates. So now there are going to be a small number, I suspect, at the moment, of business leaders. So I'm talking about board members, board chairs, CEOs, senior executives, that intuitively get the idea that being in business is an opportunity to be of service to society. There will be a small number of those, and my call to action for those right now is to get on board and begin the transformation process. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later in this episode. But there will be, unfortunately, a large rump of people in position of influence that will be very resistant and very hesitant to take the actions required to position their companies for success over the long term. And in a lot of ways, that won't be that surprising, but my sense is that a lot of those companies in the longer term won't survive. And so in that respect, I have some sympathy for those, but I would encourage every business leader to critically consider the propositions that I'm putting out here and take a look at the series of videos that I've introduced. So one of the earlier videos was addressing the topic of business operating in higher consciousness. It is an important topic. I encourage everyone watching this, if you're new to the YouTube channel and the podcast series, follow along. I then did describe a shift in business paradigm. So just kind of laying out the broad parameters of the paradigm shift that we're observing. I then addressed the fundamentals of business valuation. That's really important because wealth creation is grounded in the notion that, and particularly wealth creation on an ongoing basis, is grounded in a notion that, the board, the executives have a obligation to undertake strategic actions that enhance the value of the firm, and in doing that, create wealth, which is the topic of my next video, which is the nature of ongoing wealth creation. Now, 99.9% of the people operating in a position of leadership in the business community probably don't understand the fundamentals of wealth creation. The term has been bandied around, but I don't think a lot of people really understand what that means and how to create wealth, which was the topic of my next video, which was the capabilities, the internal organizational capabilities required to drive ongoing wealth creation. I then sort of laid out an aspiration for companies, what companies need to do to be top tier. And the general conclusion from that is that, the vast majority of companies operating, in the global sphere will need to undertake significant transformation, which gives rise to the need for transformation consulting services. And I put a call out for those that are, currently in top tier strategy consulting firms or have recently retired from that, to partner with me and build a transformation consulting capability 100% geared to this transformation effort. It's going to be an important legacy leaving opportunity. I then felt compelled to address the fairly toxic topic of executive reward and a very simple solution to overcome the excuse the French, the shit show that's out there in the executive reward space. There's a lot of nonsense going on. It's driving a lot of really bad behavior. And I actually laid out the notion that is often bandied around in the executive reward space, that one of the fundamental objectives of, executive reward is to motivate executives to, create value, or but there's an underlying, notion that there is a need to motivate executives to do the right thing. And to be completely honest with you, I find that notion, highly offensive, because in my simplistic view of things, being a business leader is an opportunity to be of service to society and to create wealth. And quite frankly, if you need to be motivated as a business executive to create wealth on an ongoing basis, you probably shouldn't be in that role. And so there's a real opportunity for boards in the executive succession process to really think about the characteristic and the motivation of their CEOs and executives. And if they, a lot of boards are struggling with very difficult conversations with the executive team around the topic of executive reward, there's a really simple solution. I'd highly encourage you to take a look at that video. And then the previous video to this was an aspiration for institutional investors. And there's a lot that I had to say on that topic as well. So that's been the journey for this podcast series up until now. And so I'm now turning the attention to what consumers, the 7.9 billion people that make up the broader society and community around the world, the kinds of things that they need and should do to effectively force, if you like, executives to rethink what it is that they're doing. And the call to action for consumers here, and this is relevant to every person on the planet. My primary thought process here is that consumers need to engage in their consumption patterns with a mindset of higher consciousness. In other words, conscious consumption, if you like. So, at the end of the day, a lot of businesses, and particularly those businesses and large corporates that don't operate from a position of higher consciousness, will basically fall back to the idea that they are simply providing products and services as cheap as possible, because, regardless of their, the benefit that they have for either the individual or the wider community, and frankly, the environment as well. Because quite frankly, people are willing to pay for it and they're willing to buy it. And so in order to really drive the wedge for corporates to start thinking about the fundamental benefit of their products and services and the way that they are produced and distributed, to drive that wedge, to really force them to think about it, consumers really need to stop buying junk and think about paying a proper price for higher quality goods and services. And that will encourage and drive, businesses to really up the game in terms of the quality of the products and services that they're putting out there, the way that they are produced, the way that they are distributed, and the impact that those products and services and their consumption, production and distribution have on the individual, the wider community, and the environment. So one of the primary thought processes here is that more is not always better. And around the world, and in the US, probably more than in a lot of other places, to be honest, there's this notion, in the consumer environment that the consumers have the right to consume as much as possible for as cheap as possible. And quite frankly, that kind of thinking is not sustainable. And so the broader call out there for, the consuming community, which is basically everyone on the planet, is you really need to think about what you're consuming, and the price that you are paying. And the idea here is that you may want to think about consuming less, so less volume, more thought into, do I really need this? What is this? What is this purchase opportunity? How is it going to enhance my well-being? And it's my well-being as a whole person, not pandering to, the pleasure principle response in the brain. And certainly don't be swayed by advertising. um, so, consumers really do need to think about, why am I buying this? How is it benefiting me? And start thinking about how, what the fundamental nature of that product and service is, and how it benefits me as a whole person, not just the pleasure principle, dopamine response. And I think when you start doing that, you start getting down to the idea that it is probably better to consume less with less waste, higher quality products and services, and then be willing to pay a higher price. Now, the higher price is going to be really important because, quite frankly, and I'm going to have to share another screen here, so just bear with me while I lay that up. This is one of my favorite screens. So I've talked endlessly about this two-dimensional characterization or assessment matrix, which I call the cause OCI assessment matrix. It has two dimensions: the cause rating, and cause stands for commerce acting to uplift society, and the E is exponentially. So it's not in a linear way; it's an exponential way, and it does measure the extent to which organizations are operating in higher consciousness, if you like, with a motivation to create wealth by being of service to society. And the horizontal dimension, OCI, stands for Organizational Capability Index. And it's the good old-fashioned internal capabilities required to create wealth on an ongoing basis. It's the sort of the hard science of corporate governance and management, including culture and leadership and innovation capability. Because at the end of the day, the primary driver of ongoing wealth creation is, in fact, creativity and innovation. It is a human endeavor. Here's the thing. The vast majority of companies out there in the world today are probably going to be heavily dominated in the bottom left quadrant of this matrix. And trust me, this is not a position that you want to be in, because those companies that are positioned in the bottom left quadrant, and who are either unwilling or unable to transform themselves to be in the top right of the quadrant of the matrix, which, by the way, is where you want to be a top tier company that is worthy for institutional investors to actually own you. So those that are positioned here and are unable or unwilling to transform themselves, quite frankly, my sense is that in the medium term, they will not survive. And so we as consumers are asking companies to transform themselves so that they are being of service to society. And here's the thing, people. These companies are going to have to wind down trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars of legacy infrastructure and business models, and then invest trillions more to create products, services, infrastructure, and business models that are fit for purpose. And so there's a significant amount of investment that's going to be required for these companies to serve you, the consumer, and society in a more compelling way. And so that investment does require an appropriate return. And in later videos, I'm going to talk about what is an appropriate return, but it will require an appropriate return. And what that means is that you probably won't be able to continue to buy as much junk as possible at the lowest price possible. And so conscious consumption, or consumption in higher consciousness, is all about fundamentally thinking about, why are you buying this? How has it been produced? Where does the company sit in this matrix? If they're sitting in the bottom left, you may want to vote with your wallet and simply not buy from them. And once you stop buying from them, the executives, and even those executives that, just aren't able to think, at a higher level of consciousness, will be forced to realize that, the paradigm has shifted, consumption patterns and attitudes have shifted, and it will force them to move and transform themselves. So I've previously talked about the investment community, and particularly the institutional investment community, having a significant role in putting pressure on boards and executives to transform themselves in order to continue to be investment worthy. And so, so we've got the investment community over here putting pressure on boards and executives, and we've got consumers over here putting their own pressure on boards and executives through their consumption preferences. So, and then, over time, there'll be a catalyst where the pressure from both of these forces is sufficient to create a cataclysmic kind of movement, and a groundswell. But we don't have to wait for these forces. Will take time to work their way through. But my sense is that there will be a sufficiently large enough, but quite frankly, in proportion, small proportion of executives and board members that kind of get it. They intuitively get it, and they're willing to move now. And they will be the way showers, by the way. And so it is important that we do have first mover types that do become way showers, so that the the laggards out there that just like to benchmark and look at what other people are doing because they don't have the fortitude and the vision to act on their own, can look at what's going on and say, hey, there is a paradigm shift taking place here. There is a consumption shift taking place here. There is a societal attitude shift taking here. There is a shift in the investment community taking here. Hey, I need to move. So that's my call to action for the consuming community. Please, make the change today. And by the way, every moment that you consume is an opportunity to consume in higher consciousness. And so I really encourage everyone, 7.9 billion people on the planet, to fundamentally and critically think about what they're consuming, how they're consuming, how much they're consuming, and where their consumption dollar is going, and how that is either holding companies in lower consciousness because, hey, it's too easy, or forcing them to start to shift and operate into higher consciousness. So thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Jump onto YouTube, just in the search bar, search for Valuation Insights, 2 words, Valuation Insights. That's the name of my YouTube channel. And the podcast series is called Transforming Business. So thanks for tuning in. Please like, share, subscribe, and look forward to catching you next time. Bye for now.